Hi, I'm Carrie Dennett. I'm a Pacific Northwest-based registered dietitian, and I'm thrilled to be here on this Facebook Live for Build Up Dietitians. So welcome, welcome. Good morning, good barely afternoon, depending on where you're tuning in from. And just to let you know, I'll let you know this at the end too, but if you want to connect with me, you can find me on Facebook at Nutrition by Carrie, Twitter and Instagram are at Carrie Dennett, and my website is nutritionbycarrie.com. So we have a lot to talk about today, and if you have any questions for me, be sure to type them into the comments, and I will get to them. And so let's see, like I said, I'm based in the Pacific Northwest. I am a second career dietitian, so a lot of what I talk about today is going to be related to that. My transition from being a journalist to becoming a dietitian to really being both now, and really enjoying my journalism career more than I ever did before I was a dietitian. So just to, I see some people on. If anybody just wants to give like a quick shout out or hi to make sure they're hearing me okay and everything's good, that would be fabulous. But otherwise, I'm going to jump right in. So like I said, I'm a second career dietitian, and I decided I wanted to be a journalist when I was in 9th grade, and realized that being an artist was not going to be a good career choice, even though I was the best at drawing horses when I was in 3rd grade. So I thought, well, what do I like to do? And I was on my 8th grade newspaper, which this is going to really, really date me, but we didn't even Xerox them, we mimeographed them. So anyway, so I decided that's what I was good at. So I went to University of Oregon to study journalism, and that's kind of where I set out. I worked, I think after graduation, a couple of weekly newspapers in Oregon, and then my now husband, then boyfriend, and I moved to Fort Wayne, Indiana for a year, worked at a paper there, and then we moved to New Jersey to the Asbury Park Press. So hello to any dietitians who are Jersey-based. We were there for a couple years, and while we were there, we decided to get married. We eloped to New York City, and we will be celebrating our 23rd anniversary at Finchley this year. So, you know, what better place to celebrate an anniversary? So I was quite happy working in journalism. We moved back to Seattle in the mid to late 90s, and I had trouble getting a journalism job. I got on at the Seattle Times, but I was doing more editing and fact checking and less writing. So in a move that turned out to kind of predestine my move to nutrition, I left newspapers. I took a job as a copywriter for a company who did corporate wellness. We had kind of one of those dial-a-nurse hotlines, that sort of thing. So I was writing consumer-facing health and wellness information for, you know, postcards, newsletters, websites, that sort of thing. And somewhere along the way, I had the grand epiphany that, oh my gosh, if people ate better and exercised more, maybe they could prevent diabetes, prevent hypertension, because those were things I was writing about. I was also writing about what to do if you cut your finger, but I was also writing about disease prevention. And I feel like even though I wasn't an expert, I didn't have credentials at the time, I will say I was being pretty responsible. I was always, always, always relying on sources like the American Diabetes Association, American Heart Association, none of the nonsense you kind of see on blogs today. So I did that for a while and really enjoyed it. And then I had another epiphany, like, wait a minute, I'm putting out this carefully crafted copy, giving this great information that people could use to maybe make their lives better. But are they using it? Is it enough just to put information out there? Is education what people really need? And I knew that from my own life and just simply being in the world, witnessing friends, family, and other people try to make behavior changes. And it wasn't just a matter of information. It was motivation, obstacles, you know the drill. So I decided, okay, I want to be able to help people one-on-one to make changes, to improve their health, live better, happier lives. And, I looked into a little bit and I noticed, okay, registered dietitian was one route. And I noticed there at that time, this would have been probably about 2007, there were quite a few online programs where you could get some kind of certification as a health coach or a nutrition certification. And I was like, no, if I'm going to do this, I'm going to do it right. I'm going to go back to school. I'm going to become a registered dietitian. And so I started looking around in the Seattle area. What programs are there? University of Washington, where I eventually went, had a master's program, and it was a coordinated program. So, and I already knew about the situation with dietetic matching programs. I'm like, I don't want to go down that road. I want a program where if I get in, I know I've got my internship. And I also wanted a master's degree because I already had a bachelor's degree. I didn't want to get another bachelor's. So I was dead set on University of Washington. But then I looked at their requirements and I was like, oh my goodness, I'm going to have to take 2 years of science classes before I can even apply. So I guess I'm not going to be a dietitian because I'm a writer. I am not a science person. I can't do this. So I dismissed the idea, but it wouldn't go away. It's kind of like playing whack-a-mole, kept popping up. And so finally I was like, fine, if this is what I need to do to become a dietitian, I'm going to go to school and I'm going to take science and I'm going to kick butt at it. And guess what? I did. And it turned out I love science. I think science is amazing. I think science can be frustrating, certainly, but it can also be fun and it's fascinating. And I think, the fact that I did that was a testament to if you want something enough, you'll do it. So I did that. I spent 2 years, going through the whole, the circuit, chemistry, organic chemistry, which I took one summer. That was all I did. It was fun. Biochem, all that was great. I got into University of Washington, which I was thrilled because it is a competitive program. And I started graduate school in the fall of 2011. And it was interesting, just one of my impetuses was as I was like working for this company, writing, corporate wellness stuff, I realized I wanted to be an expert. I didn't want to only be relying on other people. So that was important to me. And that was one reason I chose University of Washington, because it was science-based, whereas some of the other programs in the Seattle area were a little less so. So I went forth with that. And as I was going through graduate school, I kind of was thinking about what kind of dietitian I wanted to be after I graduated. And certainly I hope to continue writing and writing from an expert point of view. But I also knew I did not want to work in a hospital. And at the time, and maybe even still now, it hasn't been that long, it was kind of the party line that you had to put in your time in a hospital. And I just did not want to do that. And I remember my first Fancy, it was 2012 in Philadelphia. And I went to a nutrition entrepreneurs networking event. And I was talking to some of the dietitians and they were asking what I wanted to do, once I graduated and finished my internship. And I said, well, I don't want to work in a hospital, but I know I have to do that first. And then I want to do blah, blah, blah. And they were like, if you don't want to work in a hospital, don't work in a hospital. You don't have to. And I was like, what? I was just like, oh my gosh, I found my people. So, all that said, I do want to say, and I've said this to so many prospective students who have contacted me over the last handful of years, and many have contacted me because they know I write and that's something they want to do eventually. And my hospital inpatient clinical rotation, even though I knew the entire time that is not what I wanted to do for a career, and I was very upfront with my preceptors about that, it was an amazing experience and I'm glad I had it. I was kind of glad when it ended, but I don't want anybody to feel like I'm dissing hospital dietitians because they are so vital. And I think that's what's exciting about this profession is we are so diverse and there are so many ways that people can practice dietetics. And I feel like if I'm in a hospital and I need nutrition care, I am going to be like super glad that there are dietitians there. So not to diss any of that at all. So nevertheless, I was, ironically, I got my first break towards my career while I was still in grad school. It was the beginning of 2012. So I'd only been in grad school for about 6 months. And the Seattle Times was starting a health page and they didn't really know what they wanted to do with it. And so my husband still worked there at the time. And he's just like, well, do you want me to give him the URL to your blog? And I'm like, yeah, sure. Because I didn't mention that one thing I did when I decided I was serious about going back to school to become a dietitian, and I was in the middle of those 2 years of science prereqs, I also started my blog. At that time, it was on Blogger. I've since, moved everything to WordPress like most people. But I wanted, I didn't know if it would help, but I wanted people, when I applied at University of Washington to see that I was serious. I was not like changing careers on a whim, although taking 2 years of science prereqs is not exactly a whim. So the editors of the Seattle Times, they looked at my blog, they saw how I wrote about nutrition, they saw that I was evidence-based, that I wasn't, just writing wackadoo stuff like you kind of see out there, and they offered me a nutrition column. So I started writing as a nutrition columnist for the Seattle Times while I was still in graduate school, which I did feel a little bit of pressure about that, and of course I was going to be careful and accurate about what I was writing. But I felt like I had this other pressure because I knew the professors would be watching me, and if I wrote anything that they felt reflected badly on the school, because my tagline did say I was a graduate student in the nutritional sciences program. So that started, and that kind of got me on my way. And when I graduated, and this is kind of a funny story, literally the day after I got the email saying that everything was through for my master's and I was officially graduated, the day after that, I got laid off from the job I had that writing for corporate wellness. I got laid off. So the universe giveth and the universe taketh away, but that set me free to kind of forge my own path in dietetics. And I worked for a little bit at a clinic that did a lot of kind of alternative oncology care, but only for people who are working with doctors getting traditional care. So I did some nutrition counseling there, but I was billing insurance and I wasn't getting enough clients and I wasn't making enough. So I started looking for something else. And then I found an outpatient job at a clinic in Seattle, working directly for one doctor as opposed to working in the larger nutrition department. And that was actually a wonderful fit. It was almost like having private practice, except it wasn't. I was being paid hourly. I had benefits. So it was a great opportunity for me to kind of test my wings, so to speak, but in, not taking that scary jump into full-on private practice right away. So I feel really blessed that I had that. And, my patients were wonderful. The other providers in that office were wonderful. So it was great. And at the same time, I was building my freelance writing career, which I know probably a lot of people want to know about. I had been steadily writing for the Seattle Times, and they had other health columnists, and gradually they kind of whittled them away until it came to the point where I was writing weekly, which I still am. And I started, right after I graduated, I started writing I was asked to write for Environmental Nutrition newsletter. And that led very quickly to me writing for Today's Dietitian magazine, which I pretty much do monthly. I think the only time I've missed a month is when there's been a month where I've written 2 articles and then I kind of have the next month off. So that's been a great gig. And I love writing for Today's Dietitian because I love writing for dietitians. And I also like that I get to dig into the research more for those articles than a lot of the articles I might write just for consumers. So it's a different kind of writing, a different audience. I can use terms that are a little more sciencey, which since I, came to love science, who knew, is kind of exciting to me. So I kind of was steadily building up a freelance gig. And then it was the beginning of 2016. I was in the south of France on vacation. And I was checking my email on my phone one morning. My husband was making breakfast. And I was like, oh my God, oh my God, oh my God. And my husband's like, what? And it's like, the Washington Post emailed me. They want me to write for them. And they found me on Twitter. So who says social media doesn't pay off, right? And obviously from there, they saw that I was writing elsewhere, that I had some cred, I had some substance. So they asked me to write a tryout article, and they wanted it soon. So I'm on vacation, and well, what am I going to say no? And fortunately, I think I had a little bit of a cold, so we really weren't going out and sightseeing as much as we might have. So I wrote my first tryout article for them, and they liked it, and I've been writing for them monthly ever since, which is, a great gig, not just because it brings in more freelance income, but I really appreciate having a variety of platforms to try to put out nutrition information that is, usable, it's accurate, and a lot of times I am trying to debunk some nutrition myths. I think one of the questions, something I get asked a lot, I think this is a question that Leah kind of threw out to me, was, what's one article or topic that's gotten the most feedback or comments? And, I had to think about that because I write about so many topics, and sometimes it's the articles that I wouldn't expect that I get a lot of feedback on, a lot of emails, a lot of comments. And I will say, I don't check my comments. I think anybody who ever goes in the comments section of articles, he knows that there's a lot of trolls. So my husband will usually kind of check comments, and he'll just kind of give me an overview, like, oh yeah, a lot of comments, and a lot of them are a little out there, or oh yeah, or sometimes he tells me that people were kind of attacking what I said, but then other people jumped in to say, no, she's actually right. And I'm just like, yay. But anyway, the one I probably got the most feedback on, and that I might be saying that just because this one really sticks in my mind, is back in March for the Washington Post, I wrote about celery juice. And this was not a topic I pitched. I was due to send in a pitch to my editor, and she's like, hey, do you feel like writing about celery juice? And I'm like, yeah, sure. I knew it was a thing, but I really hadn't looked into it. And when I did look into it, it was just like, holy hell, Batman, you literally cannot make this up, except, oh, someone did make it up. I mean, talk about pseudoscience on steroids. I couldn't even believe it. So, in my article, I was quite clear that this was pseudoscience. But at the same time, I wasn't going to totally diss celery because it is a vegetable and it does have nutrients. And I got quotes from 2 dietitians and talking about, if you want to put celery in a smoothie or juice, maybe what you would do it with, but don't expect it to have magical properties. And oh my gosh, I got a combination of feedback. I got some people who were, like, thank you. Thank you for setting the record straight. Thank you for debunking this. But then I got people who had fully subscribed to the celery juice as a miracle elixir bandwagon. And a couple people came after me on email, but I was in Florida. I was on a Florida citrus tour. And oh my gosh, I think the article got posted on one of the celery juice forums, and people started coming after me on Facebook and Twitter. And I had to block a few people. But, that was interesting. It was just like, you don't understand. You've clearly never drunk celery juice. If you did, you would know. It's so wonderful. And I was like, no, I know the science. I know that these claims are not accurate. And, I stand by that. So that was probably one of the most interesting. But, generally, I get some people I get some haters coming after me, but most people are pretty positive. And I think people actually appreciate, in this world where nutrition information, especially information put out in the media, is so confusing and it can seem so contradictory, even though we as dietitians know that that's not necessarily true, that, reporting on one study doesn't mean the whole body of research on that topic has shifted. But I think, people appreciate someone they can trust. And, I've been told that, I've been told by just everyday people as well as professional writers that they appreciate my columns because they say I never condescend. And I think that's really important. I think we can't make people feel, whether we're talking to people one-on-one or we're writing, whether it's for, online, on social media, I think we can't make people feel stupid because, well, they're not stupid. People are trying to do the best they can generally. And if they feel stupid, that's just going to be a turnoff, and it's not going to be a motivator to maybe make positive change. So I do appreciate that, I never make people feel like, well, you should know this, or you're silly if you believe this, because it's confusing. And, the people that are spewing pseudoscience often talk in scientific terms. And, sometimes I'll read something and it's like, if I didn't know better, I would buy it. I would buy this, so if I can be almost confused, I see how people who don't have a nutrition background or a science background can be full on confused. So, so my freelance writing progressed, and this, the wonderful job I had that was almost private practice, that was 30 hours a week. And I was doing all this writing. I was starting to do more speaking. And it was getting a little bit much. Work-life balance didn't exist. There was no balance. But it's hard when you're an entrepreneur and you're doing a lot of things and you find some fulfillment in all of those things. It's hard to know what maybe you want to give up. But gradually it was just getting to the point where, okay, something's got to give. I either need to give up some of my freelance writing, some of my speaking, or I need to give up my day job. And I was not willing to give up any of my freelance writing or other things. So we made the leap last fall. I decided to go full on solopreneur, which is kind of scary, especially since my husband already had left the Seattle Times to work for himself. He's a web designer. So I don't know, 2 solopreneurs in one household, is this a good idea? But I did it. We left Seattle in November, and we're now in the process of building a house in Oregon, which is a whole other level of craziness, but it's super exciting. And it was funny because I thought, well, this is going to be great. When I give up my day job, things are going to slow down a little bit. I'm going to get to do all the things I want to do and more things that I didn't have time to do, but I'll also have more time to just not be working. And that hasn't exactly worked out yet, but hopefully someday. I landed a couple really big long-term writing projects one of them's wrapping up in a week, which I'll be glad about. Then I'll get a little bit of a breathing room to do other things like develop an online program. But it's interesting when so many things come your way and you want to say yes to everything, which I think, since I've only been a dietitian for 5 years, I think that tends to happen. I think when you're newer in your career, you don't want to say no to everything, say no to anything. And I got a really hard lesson early this year because I had said yes to a lot of stuff that was in Seattle. And so I was hauling back and forth to Seattle a lot. And I just realized, no, I can't do this anymore. And I think if you listen to my little promo for this talk, I said I would disclose the biggest mistake I've ever made. And so here goes. This was just dumb and it'll never happen again. So I had been asked, I think early last fall, to speak at a conference in Seattle. I'm not going to say who it was for, but it was for, people who are in an allied health profession. Let's just say that. They wanted me to talk about nutrition, and we talked about things, and it was really good. And they said, well, we really don't pay a lot. Do you think you could get sponsorship? And I knew of a couple potential sponsors I could contact, and I'm like, sure. Well, it turned out I couldn't get sponsorship because these groups were not specifically interested in funding me to speak to this particular group, because that wasn't a group they were really trying to reach. So that just wasn't in their budget. Well, my big mistake was I didn't ask the organizers of the conference, oh, if I don't get sponsorship, how much do you pay? Well, and I committed to doing it. Well, I got paid a whopping total of $100. Yes, $100. And I did a 4-hour talk in the morning, followed by a 2-hour talk in the afternoon. Plus I had to pay my own hotel and transportation. So lesson learned, ask questions up front. And, I wasn't going to back out of it because I'd given my word, and the actual event was a good experience. I mean, the people were very appreciative. So, that was all good. But it's just like, yeah, especially when you're working for yourself, you can't work for free. And I think dietitians are often asked to do work for free. So it was like, okay, 2019 is a learning year for me, and never do that again. I think the one freebie I did this year that I don't regret, I was asked to give the keynote address at Seattle's Go Red for Women Luncheon, which they're a nonprofit. And, they said they could pay me a stipend, and I'm like, no. So that I would do again. But I think, in terms of if I'm going to be overextending myself and working hard, at least I'm going to get paid for it. And I think as dietitians, we often don't recognize the value of not just the actual time investment of the work we do. And actually, no, that's not true. I think there's the tangible work you do, like giving a talk, but there's also the time preparation, but also our name and our credentials, and the fact that we've put money and time into our education to become dietitians. I think we don't value that as much as we could. So let's see. Well, I'm not getting any questions in the comments, but type them in if you have them, please. In the meanwhile, I'm going to go to a couple other questions that Leah had that I want to make sure I covered. And one was, if somebody wants to get into writing for a newspaper, what's my advice? And that's really tricky because when I got my start, it started with the Seattle Times and it led to, Today's Dietitian and the Washington Post. I do have a journalism degree. And I did have a background in newspapers, so that definitely gave me a leg up. Now, I also started writing for, my nutrition journalism career started with a major metropolitan newspaper. That's probably not going to happen for somebody who doesn't have a lot of writing experience. Now, if you are interested in writing for a newspaper and you live in a smaller town with a smaller newspaper, that might be an entry point. You might not get paid much. I know a lot of smaller newspapers really do not pay much. So that's, again, an example of you have to decide, what is it worth? Are you getting something else out of it? Are you getting writing samples that maybe can help you move up? Is the nature of your day job such that if people read you in the newspaper, you might get clients? You never know. Sometimes there are those less tangible direct benefits that make it worthwhile. So that's a possibility. If any of you do have some writing experience and you have things to show, even if it's just a robust blog where you've been writing, really substantive blog posts, I mean, you can always pitch to publications. You never know. The Washington Post does have quite a few dietitians who write for them. I have no idea, honestly, if they're interested in taking more. I know in particular they have what's called their talent network. And I put my pitches in through those just formally after I've already agreed on a topic with my editor. But people who don't currently write for them can put in pitches that way too. So that's a possibility. It is hard. I mean, I think a lot of people are where newspapers are struggling. A lot of newspapers are laying off people. Some of them are going to digital only, which actually, ironically, if someplace is digital only, you might have an easier time getting in. My Seattle Times column is in the print publication every Sunday. It's also online. My Washington Post articles, some of them make it into the print product, but most don't. So it kind of depends, but, they're struggling. They may not pay as much, but, I say, hey, always go for it. And just kind of related to that, another question I got was, a lot of us are really frustrated by clickbait headlines. And I've done a whole webinar on that sort of topic. But I think what's important for people to know is it's usually not the writer who's writing those headlines. When I turn in articles, I have a suggested headline. And sometimes I'm like, okay, this headline's kind of crappy and clearly they're going to change it. Sometimes I think it's pretty good and sometimes they use it. So, but I am ultimately, at least with my articles, not the one who decides on the headline. And I don't think I've had too many problems with them being real clickbaity. The one for my celery juice article for Washington Post was a little clickbaity because I think it referenced Gwyneth Paltrow in it. But my editor did run it by me and there was nothing inaccurate about it. So I let it go. But my editors are pretty good about stuff like that. I think another question I had was, what is a topic I have written about a lot or been asked to write about? And it's funny, for a while, this was probably a couple years ago, I felt like I'd become the dairy reporter. I felt like I was constantly writing for various publications about what's the truth about dairy? Is full-fat dairy really better for us? What's the deal with that? And, writing about some of the research specifically about dairy fat, about how saturated fat in dairy may or may not behave the same as saturated fat in other foods, because there's the whole food matrix, that kind of thing. So I was doing a lot of dairy writing for a while, which was fun. And I feel like most recently, I've been writing a lot about the gut microbiota, which is like a huge topic and is super interesting. So I've been doing a lot about that, but writing for as many publications as I do, I write so many articles on so many topics, and I have kind of my pet topics that I try to pitch. I just turned in an article to the Washington Post on intuitive eating, which is a topic that's important to me because I am a certified intuitive eating counselor, which was quite a departure because when I first entered grad school, I was pretty sure I was going into grad school to become a dietitian to help people lose weight, to help people go on diets. And that kind of shifted while I was there because I realized, that's not the best answer. I think a lot of us know the statistics on weight regain, and I kind of came around to the philosophy that if I want to help people be healthier, I really want to help them with forming healthy behaviors that are sustainable, that, might lead to weight loss and might not, but that's not the primary objective. So those kind of topics are important to me, and I've been kind of weaving into articles more lately, just the idea kind of based on social determinants of health, which I'm sure most of you are familiar with. The idea that there are many, many things that influence health. And obviously I am a fan of nutrition because I'm a dietitian. I'm also a fan of physical activity because we know that moving our bodies is good for health. But I also realize that, there's a lot of other things that influence health. And I increasingly want other people to realize that too, to realize the value of things like sleep and finding ways to deal with the stress in their lives and to foster, healthy relationships with friends and family. Social connections are important. So I kind of want people to value nutrition, but not put all their eggs in the nutrition basket, so to speak, because I feel like that's not entirely balanced. So that's kind of things I've been weaving into my articles more lately, even if I'm not writing, solely about that type of topic. So, and I've also been writing more. I did some articles for the Seattle Times, kind of really like what to consider when you're reading about nutrition in publications like the Seattle Times, that not all nutrition research has equal weight and that kind of thing, because I really want people to not fall for nutrition myths and to be empowered so they feel confident that they can make the right choices for themselves and not feel that they don't know anything, to not feel that they're stupid, to not feel that they're failing. Because that's not a motivator for change. Feeling empowered is. So that's kind of my overall theme of what I try to get across in my writing. So we are just past a half hour, so I'm going to wrap this up. So just one more time, if you want to find me online, I'm on Facebook, Nutrition by Carrie. Instagram and Twitter is at Carrie Dennett. And my website is nutritionbycarrie.com. And I did not get any questions in the comments, but if anybody is watching this on the replay and has some questions, I will check back, and I am more than happy to chime in with any questions that do show up. So thank you for those who are on the live event, and thank you to those who watch this on the replay. And I hope to run into you at FNCE or another conference down the line, or you can just email me and say hi. And I also, if you want to email me about any questions or anything specific about, if you're trying to do more writing, I'm always willing to help. So, all right, everyone, take care.